Hi everybody, my name is Sabrina Harms and I am a volunteer for BronxWorks. Today I will be presenting the Stellar Farmers Market curriculum from the Nutrition Education Capacity Program. Today's star vegetable from our farm stands is a butternut squash, which is a very good seasonal vegetable for any fall dishes, and our meal today will be butternut squash with collard greens. Let's take a look at that recipe before we get started. To make butternut squash with collard greens, you will need 1 tablespoon vegetable oil, 1 onion, chopped, 1 red bell pepper, chopped, 3 cups of seeded and cubed butternut squash, 3 cups of chopped collard greens, half a cup of water, 1/4 teaspoon salt, and black pepper to taste. This recipe will make 4 servings. Here are all of the ingredients that I will be using today to make butternut squash with collard greens. I was able to get my bell pepper, my onion, my collard greens, and my butternut squash all from the farm stand. You'll notice that I'm using a green bell pepper instead of the red bell pepper that the recipe calls for. This will make my dish a little bit less sweet, but it is nevertheless a good substitution to make if you only have a green bell pepper on hand. I made sure to wash all of my produce in addition to my cooking utensils before I started, and I washed my hands very well with soap and warm water to make sure that I'm not transmitting any germs through my cooking. Let's start by chopping our onion. So we are going to use a similar technique that we've used in previous videos, where first we create a flat surface of the onion by cutting off both of the ends. You might have to pull off some of the papery outer layer at this point, as I did, as it might get in the way of your cutting. Make sure that we're moving the knife in a wave-like motion and we're keeping our fingers in that bear claw style. Now let's cut our onions straight down the center so that we have 2 identical halves. Cutting our onion into 2 halves like this not only makes it easier to cut as we have a flat surface like you can see me cutting down here, but it also makes it a lot easier to take off the papery exterior layer of the skin. So once you've got that cut and the onion has the exterior layer removed, what you're going to want to do is, following my instruction on the screen, just move your knife up your onion and cut it into strips. It's relatively easy to cut an onion into chopped smaller pieces because of the layers that it has. So after this, you're going to want to turn your pieces onto their sides and just cut up again. Now let's chop up our pepper. As you might recall, I am using a green bell pepper today instead of a red bell pepper, as that was what I had on hand. I'm first going to start by just cutting the bell pepper straight down the middle. I find that this is the easiest way to remove the core on the inside. As you can see, that core is white and has all the seeds. I have chosen to slice one of my halves into 2 smaller pieces, and I just turn the bell pepper on the side and cut out that part of the core. And I'm also cutting off, there's a little bit on the bottom that's got like a black stem, and I cut that off too. So I'm just going to slice my bell pepper up lengthwise, and then I'll flip those little slices over and cut it widthwise in order to get chopped pieces. Now that our pepper and onions have been cut, let's chop our butternut squash. So like I've done in the pumpkin video, if you watch that one, I'm going to remove both the top and the bottom of the butternut squash to create a flat surface, so that we can take off the skin on all the sides of the butternut squash. As you can see, the skin is pretty tough to get through. Just make sure that you're using proper knife safety, keeping your fingers away from the blade where it could cut, and making sure to move your knife in a wave-like motion to make this movement a little bit easier. Now that our butternut squash is flat on both sides and is safe to put flat on the table, we can go around and remove the skin from all of its sides. So let's talk about butternut squash a little bit while we cut this. For the best buy, you should choose a butternut squash that is heavy for its size and has a smooth, firm skin. To prepare, wash and remove the seeds. You could actually eat the seeds if you want, sort of similar to pumpkin seeds. You can roast them in the oven. You can leave the skin on too and bake for 30 minutes at 350 degrees Fahrenheit or cook over the stovetop until tender. To keep fresh, store in a cool, dry place for up to 3 months. Squash contains potassium, which is good for a healthy heart. Now that we've removed the skin from the butternut squash, what I did is just cut all of the remaining butternut squash into 2 pieces. On the inside, you'll notice is the pulp where the seeds are, and what you're going to want to do is you can scrape that out with a spoon, or if it's easier, you can just cut it out with a knife. With the remaining butternut squash that I have, I'm going to cut straight down, making little strips. I'll then turn the little pieces that I'm cutting onto their sides and cut smaller chunks so that I get a nice cubed butternut squash. Here's some quick tips when you're cooking butternut squash. Any winter squash can actually be used for another in a recipe, so you could try acorn, Hubbard squash, or even kabocha squash for a new flavor or texture when making this dish or any other squash dish. You can add leftover cooked squash to yogurt or oatmeal too to just fortify your breakfast a little bit more. Another good thing to do is to add squash to a soup or casserole. Finally, let's cut up our collard greens. So first I'm taking a bit of a bunch of collard and I'm going to cut off the stems. I'll just put those to the side. I'm not going to use them, I'll just use the leafy parts. So what I like to do is to roll up my greens a little bit just so that they're a little thicker, because it can be kind of hard to cut leafy vegetables into little chunks. And then I'll just cut up lengthwise, similar to how I've been cutting all of my other produce so far. Now that I've chopped up all of my vegetables, I've been heating up some oil in this large pot over medium heat. I am now going to add my onions, so here it is in this bowl here. And my pepper. I'm using green pepper, but the recipe calls for red. You can use whatever you've got. And I'm going to let this onion and pepper cook in here until it's soft, and then I'll add some of the other ingredients. So now I've been cooking my onions and peppers for a little while just together, and they're about soft. It has taken me about 3 minutes, but it will depend on both how much onion and pepper you have as well as what temperature your stovetop is set to. Around now they're starting to get soft. I noticed that because both of them start to change color a little bit. The onions have gotten a little bit more translucent, almost a little yellowy color, and the green peppers are less green than they were before they were cooked. So now that we have them soft, I'm going to add in the butternut squash. So here's my butternut squash. We're going to pour that in. And now that I've stirred a little, we're going to cover and cook this whole thing together for 5 minutes. It's been about 5 minutes since I added the butternut squash, so I'm going to take off the lid. And you can hear the sizzling noise of all the vegetables cooking together. They smell really good too. The onion adds that nice, almost meaty smell, and then we also have some butternut squash, which is giving me a bit of a sweet aroma. So this is already coming together very nicely. So we can put the lid off to the side. And now I'm going to add all my collard greens. So this is 4 cups of collard greens. And in addition to that, we're going to add the water. So the recipe calls for ½ a cup of water, but you might want to add a little bit more if you're worried about the vegetables sticking to the pan. I'm adding just a little bit more because I don't want them to stick. We'll pour that in. And then we're also going to add some salt and pepper. So in the recipe, it calls for 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I personally don't have any of those measuring utensils at home, so I'm just going to add a couple pinches of salt. And pepper is, of course, to taste, so add a little bit of pepper. And we are going to cook everything in here for 8 to 10 minutes or until the vegetables are soft. And then after that, we should be ready to taste. Remember that cooking is family time. Kids can help by removing seeds from the squash and discarding or baking for a yummy snack. And they can also stuff squash halves with a vegetable mixture. So now that I am perfectly content with my food, I am going to serve immediately. So before I do that, let's take a little taste test of what we just made. Make sure that you're grabbing both the collard greens and the butternut squash in this mouthful. Let's go. So it's a little bit hot, so you might have noticed it took me a little while to finish that biteful. The butternut squash specifically was pretty hot, but I really like the flavor combination here. If you've used collard greens before when you're cooking, you'll notice it has a little bit of like a bitter taste when you bite into it, and that mixed with the mild sweetness of the butternut squash was really refreshing and a really nice fall themed dish. So thank you for joining me today. Stick around for a little bit of more information about the farm stand, and I'll see you next week. Bye! Next Thursday, November 19th, is our last farm stand, but there is still time to stop by between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. to shop locally and get fresh fruits and vegetables so that you can make these healthy recipes at home. When you stop by, make sure you go to the outreach table so you can watch these virtual videos and receive health bucks to use at the farm stand. We accept cash, FMNP coupons, health bucks, EBT, and SNAP. If you haven't already seen the rest of our cooking recipe videos, make sure to check them out on our YouTube channel and like and comment below if you enjoyed this video. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you soon. Bye!